may be generic, but this is actually one of my favorite places in the world. Why? Well, I think it represents the most important infrastructure of the 21st century. This is a part of Microsoft's Columbia data center campuses. These house the computers that fuel our lives. There are more than 20 buildings, each large enough to house 2 commercial aircraft. They fill 2 million square feet. They're spread out over 300 acres. But what's really interesting is what's inside. It's something that almost no one ever gets to go see. But come with me. It's COVID times. I need to wear my mask, but I'll show you around. Well, as we walk around, first I've just spared you not just a metal detector, but what is probably the longest and most substantial security checkpoint you'll ever find on planet Earth. But what is so interesting to me is what you see here. This is just a glimpse of the types of server computers that we find in room after room and building after building on these campuses. There are almost 500,000 of these server computers. They store as much data as you would find in more than 50,000 libraries of Congress. And I think that captures so well how this really is the infrastructure for almost everything that we're engaged in today. The way you live your life, the way you do your work, the way research and development are all moving forward. It all relies on this enormous amount of data and this enormous amount of computing power. So you just see here so much innovation all connecting together. But actually, that's not the end of the story. Come back outside and I'll show you one more really interesting piece. These campuses represent not only the most advanced digital infrastructure in the world, but some of the most advanced energy infrastructure as well. Why? Well, first, if we ever lose power from the electrical grid, we need to keep the computers running. There are more than 19,000 battery cells, each like the battery under the hood of your car, that will do just that. And at the same time that that happens, these big electrical generators will start operating as well. In fact, there's more than 140 of these generators on these campuses. Each of these will power the equivalent of 3,000 homes. The good news is with the latest advances in emissions technology, they actually give out less emission than a typical lawnmower you might use in your backyard. Each today runs on diesel fuel. In fact, there are tens of thousands of gallons of diesel fuel stored here, but not 10 years from now. We've said that by the end of this decade, each one of these needs to go. They'll be replaced by either new generators that run on hydrogen power or new advanced fuel cells. And in that, you see this extraordinary intersection between digital technology, energy technology, environmental science, and the need for innovation. This, in so many ways, is the physical embodiment of our mission to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more.
Impressive, isn't it? What is even more impressive is not just the sheer size of these data centers, but the emphasis on security, sustainability, using innovative technology in digital, energy, and environmental science to empower every human and every organization on the planet to achieve more. What you just saw there is actually one of many such Azure data centers. And many such Azure data centers together would then constitute an Azure availability zone. And many such Azure availability zones together would then constitute an Azure region. All right, so let's jump right into the Microsoft Azure Global Infrastructure Portal As you can see, there are a number of green dots which are kind of spread across the globe. Now, each of these green dots actually represent a Microsoft Azure data center region. Now, if I go into one of the regions, so let's say I click on South India, which is a region which I am closer to. So it tells me the location of that region, which is Chennai in this case, the year it is opened, and all the good information that you need. So keep in mind, like we discussed, this particular region also has availability zones, and each of these availability zones also have, a number of data centers within them. So you can also see a gray dot, which represents a recently announced Microsoft Azure data center region. So together today, Microsoft globally has 70 plus data center regions, and this number keeps growing all the time. Hey everyone, my name is Jayant. I work as a Senior Principal Engineering Technologist at Dell Technologies, and I welcome you to my YouTube channel, Jayant on Cloud. Please hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified as and when I upload new videos. Also leave your comments in the comment section and let me know what you think about this new video. Like I discussed in my previous episode, Why Hybrid, there are a number of reasons like regulatory compliance, data sovereignty, data proximity, edge and disconnected use cases, which are potential blockers for the public cloud adoption for many organizations. So in this episode, let's look at how Microsoft Azure hybrid portfolio is going to address some of the concerns where organizations simply cannot put their applications and data onto a public cloud infrastructure. The official branding of the Microsoft hybrid cloud portfolio is called Azure Stack. With Azure Stack family of products, we have 3 distinct products which are specifically designed to meet certain use cases. Azure Stack Hub. With Azure Stack Hub, organizations should be able to run their own autonomous private cloud infrastructure either in a connected mode or in a disconnected mode, and to be able to run cloud native applications on premises. And with Azure Stack HCI, organizations should be able to modernize their existing 3-tier SAN kind of an infrastructure into a more advanced hyper-converged infrastructure and be able to run their virtualized applications on premises. And finally, with Azure Stack Edge, organizations should be able to get rapid insights with Azure managed edge computing appliances using hardware accelerated machine learning use cases. Azure Stack Hub is a cloud-native integrated system which runs on premises either in a connected mode or in a disconnected mode. It can start from a minimum of 4 server nodes in a cluster and can expand up to 16 nodes in a cluster or in a region. And this is completely sold and supported by the third-party hardware OEM manufacturers like, for instance, Dell Technologies. With Azure Stack Hub, organizations should be able to bring Azure consistent services like IaaS and PaaS to on-premises. With Azure Stack Hub, customers should be able to also modernize their on-premises applications. This is simply to comply with data sovereignty laws and regulations like we discussed in episode 1. Azure Stack HCI is a hyper-converged infrastructure, and for those of you who are new to HCI, a hyper-converged infrastructure is a software-defined unified system that combines all the elements of a traditional data center like storage, compute, networking, and management. It is important to note that even the underlying infrastructure that powers Azure Stack Hub is a hyper-converged infrastructure. Azure Stack HCI can operate either in a connected mode or in a disconnected mode. And the best part is it can start from a minimum of 2 nodes and can grow up to 16 nodes within a cluster. And Azure Stack HCI is completely sold and supported by third-party hardware manufacturers like Dell Technologies. With Azure Stack HCI, organizations should be able to consolidate their data centers from a 3-tier SAN into a more advanced hyperconverged infrastructure to run their virtualized applications. They can use Azure Stack HCI to connect to Azure virtually and to make use of some of the Azure services, or be able to deploy and manage a high-performance, scalable SQL server, and also be able to provide compute and storage at remote and branch office locations. And finally, Azure Stack Edge. Azure Stack Edge is a cloud-managed appliance. In fact, Azure Stack Edge can be simply ordered by logging into an Azure portal. Since it's a cloud-managed appliance, it does require connectivity to the internet. And it can expand up to a single node only. And it's also important to note that Azure Stack Edge is completely sold and supported by Microsoft today. With Azure Stack Edge, organizations should be able to leverage GPA or FPGA acceleration for image inferencing or video inferencing use cases at the edge, or extend compute, AI, and storage to their edge environments, or simply use Azure Stack Edge to transfer data from their edge locations into Azure Cloud. And Azure Stack Edge today runs on a pay-as-you-go kind of a usage model, which means it is billed against an Azure subscription monthly. So with 3 distinct products, which is Azure Stack Hub, the Azure Stack HCI, and Azure Stack Edge under the Microsoft hybrid portfolio, sometimes it can get tricky and confusing to many. So what I have done is I have put together a couple of slides basically calling out some of the differences in terms of use cases and also technical features. So let's go check out each of them. Support disconnected or connected scenarios. Since Azure Stack Edge is a cloud managed appliance, it does require connectivity to Azure, hence it cannot operate in a disconnected mode. Analyze results from machine learning models or IoT events before sending data to the cloud. Now keep in mind, with Azure Stack Hub, you can run Azure consistent services on premises. So what it means is you can develop an application in public Azure and you can seamlessly deploy the same application on Azure Stack Hub without changing a single line of code. So with that, you should be able to run the next generation of AI-enabled hybrid applications, which can run where your data lives. Now, with the help of Azure Stack Hub, you can bring a trained AI model to the edge, integrate that with your existing applications for low latency intelligence, and continuously feed back into a refined AI model for improved accuracy and with absolutely no tool or process changes for your local applications. Modernize aging storage. Now, remember when I talked about refreshing, a lot of enterprises or organizations are after refreshing their age-old 3-tier SAN kind of an architecture, in which they're running virtualized applications. Now, with the help of Azure Stack HCI, now those customers can actually modernize their 3-tier SAN architecture into a more advanced hyperconverged infrastructure using Azure Stack HCI. Pay monthly for hardware, cloud billing for on-prem data workloads. Now, Azure Stack Edge is something that you can order from an Azure portal. So which means it is delivered as an appliance to you directly from Microsoft, right from an Azure portal. So which means including the hardware cost and also the software cost on top of that is going to be billed against an Azure subscription for Azure Stack Edge. So with Azure Stack Edge, you should be able to pay both the services and for the hardware on a monthly usage, on a monthly billing model. Provide Azure consistent IaaS and PaaS capabilities. Like we talked about in previous slides, only Azure Stack Hub can actually deliver Azure consistent services on premises. Hence, all IaaS and PaaS services that you can think of that are available today in public Azure are seamlessly available only on Azure Stack Hub. Build modern applications across cloud and on-premises using Azure services. So one of the biggest benefits of Azure Stack Hub is the ability to deliver Azure consistent services on-premises. So think about customers who are actually running their existing applications today in public Azure, and they want to repatriate some of that workloads to on-premises to number of reasons, like regulatory compliances, or data sovereignty issues and so on and so forth, which we discussed in my first episode. So what they can do is, without changing their application or without changing a single line of code in their application, they can seamlessly bring that application and deploy it on Azure Stack Hub and make use of PaaS and IaaS capabilities or Azure services on Azure Stack Hub. Small footprint for branch office scenarios. Now think about organizations who want to set up their branch offices or remote offices, which requires a very small footprint of the hardware, maybe just a couple of nodes or just a single node of servers. You can do that with Azure Stack HCI or Azure Stack Edge. Like we discussed, Azure Stack Edge is a single node, and Azure Stack HCI can start as small as just 2 nodes. It may not be possible with Azure Stack Hub because Azure Stack Hub will start with a minimum of 4 nodes. The ruggedized form factors in harsh and remote environments. Now think about scenarios such as military forward operating bases, which requires ruggedized kind of form factors in terms of servers and storage to be able to withstand harsh operating conditions. It could be the usage or it could be weather, whatever it may be. So all of these three, the good news is all of these 3 products can be ruggedized today. In fact, all of them are available today in a ruggedized format. All right, so in the previous slide, we looked at some of the differences in terms of use cases between the 3 products. So in this slide, we're going to talk about some of the differences in terms of technical features. Trusted enterprise virtualization, it's got to be Azure Stack HCI, because with Azure Stack HCI, you should be able to run your virtualized workloads. High availability for virtual machines, both Hub and HCI can run multiple nodes kind of a scenario. So HCI can start as minimal as 2 nodes and go up to 16 nodes in a cluster, whereas in case of Hub, it can start from a minimum of 4 nodes and go up to 16 nodes in a cluster, and it's definitely not Azure Stack Edge because it's just a single node appliance. Local control plane for ARM. So basically ARM stands for Azure Resource Manager. Now, Azure Resource Manager is the deployment and the management service for public Azure, and it is actually it has the ability to provide a management layer that actually enables you to do creation, updation, and deletion of resources in your Azure account. And you use the management features like access controls, the logs, the tags. If you're familiar with public Azure, and these are the Azure constructs that are available in public Azure today, and same constructs are actually available on Azure Stack Hub. So ARM is a local ARM interface which is available only on Azure Stack Hub. Multi-tenancy and tenant isolation. So just like public Azure, which has the ability to enable multi-tenancy, which means multiple organizations should be able to make use of the same resources or distributed resources across the same data center or different regions. Just like Azure, using Azure Stack Hub, you should be enable multi-tenancy. So think about scenarios where Azure Stack Hub is a solution that is acquired by a CSP, who's a cloud solution provider. They obviously want to provide the Azure capable services, which is deployed on premises, to their end customers, to their multiple end customers. So by enabling multi-tenancy on Azure Stack Hub, they should be able to cater Azure Stack Hub services to their multiple tenants. OEM vendor and form factor of choice. Now, both Hub and HCI today are offered by the third-party hardware manufacturers like Dell EMC, whereas Azure Stack Edge is completely sold and supported by Microsoft today. Pre-configured private cloud. Now, this is a scenario only with Azure Stack Hub, because Azure Stack Hub is literally you're bringing public Azure to on-premises, so which means that you should be able to run your private autonomous cloud on-premises. Support up to 16 nodes. Like we talked about, only Hub and HCI can grow up to a maximum of 16 nodes within a cluster. Support for VMs. Well, this is a very, very important feature to make a note of, because it can get very confusing at times. A lot of the customers and organizations and the sales communities that I talk to in the region that I operate from, which is APJ, the question that I keep getting asked is, hey, will I be able to run virtual machines on Azure Stack Hub? The answer is yes, you should be able to run your virtual machines on Azure Stack Hub, but keep in mind that Azure Stack Hub intent of Azure Stack Hub is to deliver Azure consistent IaaS and PaaS services. It should never be treated as a VM vending machine. So definitely Azure Stack Hub cannot be used just for spinning up virtual machines, but you can use Azure Stack HCI or Azure Stack Edge instead. Azure VMs supported through IaaS? Absolutely. So when you bring in IaaS, which is basically infrastructure through infrastructure as a code, basically you should be able to bring the Azure consistent IaaS virtual machines to on-premises. It's got to be Azure Stack Hub. Support for Kubernetes, which is in this case AKS, which is Azure Kubernetes Service, is supported on all three platforms today. And the GPU support. So we are seeing an increasing demand for GPUs these days because many organizations are busy doing image inferencing, the video inferencing kind of use cases. So GPU is supported on all three platforms today. FPGA for deep learning kind of use cases, which is supported only on Azure Stack Edge. Azure Managed Appliance. So like we talked about, only Azure Stack Edge, because Azure Stack Edge, you literally order Azure Stack Edge right from an Azure portal, and it's completely managed from an Azure portal. So only Azure Stack Edge is a true Azure Managed Appliance. All right, so in this episode, we saw the Microsoft Hybrid Cloud portfolio, the Azure Stack, and the three distinct products under the Azure Stack umbrella, which is Azure Stack Hub, the Azure Stack HCI, and Azure Stack Edge. With Azure Stack Hub, customers should be able to bring Azure consistent services to on-premises to meet their regulatory needs. With Azure Stack HCI, customers should be able to modernize their aging hardware infrastructure on-premises with more advanced hyperconverged infrastructure. And with Azure Stack Edge, customers should be able to run image inferencing or video inferencing use cases at the edge, and also be able to transfer the edge data back to Azure Cloud. Please leave your valuable feedbacks, critiques, and suggestions in the comment section. In my next episode, we will delve deeper into each of these products and see how organizations are able to leverage on these products to achieve their digital transformation goals on premises. Until then, stay safe and stay tuned.